So tonight we welcome June Yi. June is a member of the Clinical Social Work Registry. She has her master's in social work. She is a retired clinical social worker who has extensive experience in teaching stress management and meditation within heart health clinics and kidney care clinics. So tonight's presentation will explore how teachings of Dr. Gabor Mate can make one more aware of and effectively deal with chronic stress. Through mind-body connections, small but notable change can occur within a disease process. As chronic stress is acknowledged and transformed, the inner child can reappear holistically intact, and that can decrease one's suffering. So with that, we welcome June.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my plan for today is first to talk about chronic stress and what it does to our bodies, and then to talk about the ideas that Gabor Mate has promoted recently, followed by a meditation, and yeah, that's sort of my game plan. So anyway, chronic stress. We know a lot about acute stress, and we know a lot about the response to acute stress. So when we have acute stress, it's the fight flight. We either think this is a situation I can take on and we do the fight response, or we think this is bigger than me and I'm not safe here and we can run. And in between those two is another response, and it's the chronic stress response. And sometimes with chronic stress, what we do is we don't know whether we can fight or flight. We don't know if we're safe or not. And so what we do is we hide or we play dead. And within that response, it's chronic, which means it's ongoing until we do the things we need to do to stop that response. So that could be in the areas of how we feel about ourselves, our own self-esteem. It could be in the areas of relationships. It could be related to work. It could be related to who we feel we are. And it could be related to how we find meaning in day-to-day life. So a lot of those things could become a chronic response. And chronic means it happens over and over. This is important when you look at the kind of responses that you build your identity around. And it could be important if you're so focused on the chronic stress, because what happens is that after a while, because we have it for so long, it becomes numb. We don't know that we're feeling that stress. We're just carrying it. And until we stop to think about what's stressing us, how long has this been stressing us, we don't really know that it's there. Another way of looking at it is, so one of the concepts that Gabor Mate says is that in order to deal with chronic stress, we have to involve our emotions, because emotions is the pathway to healing. And so I'm going to introduce some other ideas about chronic stress as well. Just seeing if there's anything else I wanted to say about stress. So I made some notes, and I'm not necessarily going to follow them, but they're here for me to do that. So if we find something that is frightening to ourselves or not comfortable with ourselves, that could be the kind of stress that becomes chronic, because what we're likely to do is keep that stress away from us, away from our conscious mind, and probably somewhere in our bodies we'll feel the effects of that stress, and it'll stay there generating stress chemicals until we decide we're safe enough to do something about it. And that's called the state of freeze. Okay. So when we look at the underbelly side of life, that's where things are a little bit more rough. What we see come at risk of are things like human needs, the need to have human love, human worth, human recognition, human belonging. These are some of the things that are necessary to our psyche, that are part of our spirit, part of our soul. Sometimes it's called the inner child. And so all these things become relevant because it's the source of where we find what makes us meaning, what gives us meaning in human life. Okay? And how this is related to meditation is that meditation is about awareness. And so I'm going to be doing a meditation to open the opportunities for awareness and to give some guidance about how to see what the needs of the inner child are, the needs of our spirits, the needs of our bodies, and how we can attend to that. The reason I became interested in Gabor Mate's work is that when I was in the Reno program, he came to speak to us, and what his topic was about healthcare workers and how healthcare workers were more at risk of dying before their natural time because they were so generous in how nice they were. So when you look at that, you think, how can that put all us healthcare workers at risk? How many of you are healthcare workers or have been healthcare workers or aspire to be? Yeah. So, and do you know Gabor Mate's work on autoimmune system? Are you familiar with that? Okay, I'll be focusing a little bit about that today. So, Gabor Mate said if you went through the obits and you looked at people who died before their time, it's likely to say, this is the person who helped serve other people, maybe a physician, maybe a dietitian, maybe a occupational therapist, maybe a social worker. These people put themselves at risk because they were so nice. And so when you think about the risk of loss of years, you wonder what happened to create this situation. And so that's what piqued my interest. And it was interesting for me that Gabor Mate did all this studying and came out with a precise, comprehensive picture of what's happening inside the human body that puts people at risk. So Gabor Mate used to be a physician, psychiatrist in the Vancouver area, and worked in palliative care, and then worked in on the streets with homeless people. And throughout his years, he wondered a lot about how could he find a way back for these people so that they could enjoy their lives more, be intact with who they are more. And during the course of all those years too, he suffered a lot as he was born during a very difficult time. So not just in relationship to his parent, his mother, who had to give him away because otherwise there was a huge chance that he could die from a concentration camp or war or something like that. And he carried all these burdens with him throughout his life. But on the other side of that, it was probably the pain of him going through that led him towards the ability to find creative solutions, because the creative solutions are what makes people go ahead with their meaning. So in studying why people have autoimmune problems and why that's linked to being nice, there's some certain awarenesses that give guidance to how to get to the essence of that information and how to work it so that that the harm that that could do is broken. So awareness is part of meditation, and that's part of the meditation that I'm going to lead today. And it means different areas of awareness. One is the awareness of becoming, of finding safety in the environment, because it's very hard for a person to look inside themselves and look at something that is painful or a wound or a negative thought that it's hard to look at if they don't feel safe. If you don't feel safe, you're not going to look at those areas. So part of that is to create the conditions to feel at least safe enough to look at a little bit of the pain. And the other thing we know through meditation is that the pain, if you just hide it away, it's still there. It stays there. And if you bring it into awareness and you can deal with that pain by looking at that pain, feeling that pain, walking through that pain, that there's something freeing about that. So that's another awareness. One of the other thoughts that Gabor Mate had, and I thought this was really important, is that despite all the wounds in life, despite all the roughness in life, despite the huge underbelly of life, what Gabor Mate said is that as you take away layer upon layer of chronic stress, you will find that the inner child, the spirit, the meaning in life is all intact. And so it's worth pursuing, and it's safe to pursue that. So I found that was really interesting. So the first part of my meditation will be to introduce safety, because it's needed in order to look at any pain. And I'm not talking about big pain, I'm just talking about little pain that we're going to start with, so that that safety, that feeling of I'm safe to look at this now, has to be there. Sometimes how we deal with emotions is that if it's too painful, we can dissociate from that pain. We can numb our bodies and put it away in some place that doesn't hurt us so much. It's still there, but we just don't feel it or see it. And Gabor Mate wrote this book called When the Body Says No. When the body says no, it means that all those chemicals, all those hormones attached to holding that feeling in, covering that feeling up, leads to either an exacerbation of illness or a worsening of the human condition, or there's some impact on the body. He also says that stress doesn't cause illness, or stress doesn't, and the relief of stress doesn't cure illness necessarily, but there is a great association between, he said illness is complicated, but there's some association between how are you able to metabolize, how are you able to deal with the pain, the emotional pain, and be okay with it. And so part of the awareness is if there's something that you've numbed out about, is to see if there's some safe environmental conditions that you could have a small peek at it for a short period of time. The purpose being so that you can metabolize the stress hormones, so that your body can work through it and that you can come out feeling better. In order to be able to feel pain that is numbed or is put away, there needs to be a certain amount of allowing for vulnerability, to experience all the emotions that your body has to experience. in meditation practices called staying with and walking through the pain, so that it's recognized by the body, and the dissipation or transformation of the emotion can occur. Disassociation from the emotion, where we don't feel it, it's just put in the body, it's still there, and it does whatever it does, maybe impacting the severity of illness or some aspect of illness. And the association with emotion is when we can feel it. And when we can feel it, we can process it and change the body chemistry. So it's really a way of paying attention to what the information your body has to share with you. So I might be repeating myself, but when one starts looking at inner child needs, there can be layers of stress. And I just want to make that point again, that when you go through those layers of stress, you get in touch with the inner child who is at peace, energetic, feeling loved, feeling strong. That's what's underneath. And if you can create enough safety, the inner child reaches its super strength, where it feels safe enough to walk through bits of pain. And you know your inner child intimately, because it's part of you. And the adult can reach out to the inner child, and the communication is both ways. Now, in early work on the inner child, there were concepts about the child, inner child bonding with the mother, and a lot of the input that the baby got was from the mother. But Gabor Mate says, no, that's not it exactly. It's more than that. And it's the idea that you do bond with your mother or your caregiver, but it's more than that. What happens is that the child, without being able to speak because they're just newborn, tries to make sense of the world through sensation. And so it wants to feel loved, it wants to feel worthy, it wants to belong. But sometimes what happens is that child feels the stress of the world around him, feels the stress of what might be happening in society at that time, feels the stress of each parent, what they're going through, feels the stress of what siblings might be going through, feels the stress of what's going on in the community, what's going on in society. And that is where that learning can take place, so that the inner child doesn't feel in a safe place. It's the environment around, not just the mother, but the total environment around. And Gabor Mate said that this is the setting where people put themselves at risk, because the inner child feels like, I'm not worthy unless I can take care of my parents' needs, and they have a need to be less anxious, so I will create whatever conditions that is so that my parents can feel less anxious. So it's a two-way street. And there was also a belief before that once that path was set, it was unchangeable. But more recent studies have highlighted that with neuroplasticity, those pathways are very malleable, and that we just have to go through the process, feel that pain, and unwrap them so that we can bring out the inner child that is full of joy, full of love, and always there. So the price of not doing that, Gabor Mate said that if we don't connect with our own inner child, we could suffer from depression. And he said that depression is oppression of the soul. I was just talking to a friend of mine in Vancouver who worked with Gabor Mate, and she said that that's the one thing he would say that really stuck out in her mind. And it does seem to make a lot of sense. So, through mindfulness, this is hard work, courageous work, so I advocate doing this work in the mindset of loving kindness. And I suggest we do it through loving kindness because that adds to a safe environment, and it allows the spirit, the inner child, to be honest, to feel pain, but also to find its path. Gabor Mate says that in nature, matter is neither created nor destroyed. And that's the same with the energy of the inner child. We can wrap it up and coil it, cocoon it in all our anxieties and stresses so that we can try to have a more painless life. But in order to reach the true joy that is part of the human being, it is to go through the pain and experience that, feel that pain, so that you can get to know yourself as a joyful person. So I'm just wrapping that all up really quickly. If you want to go online, there's lots of information on this, and Gabor Mate has lots of YouTubes. There's one on stress and the immune system. There's lots of other ones too. So with neuroplasticity, you can heal old wounds, and healing has a lot to do with being in touch with the needs and the wants of the inner child, and recognizing that if we take away the stressful parts, the joyful part is inside. And we all know that stress influences autoimmune response. So in the healthcare profession, there's a lot of autoimmune illnesses, and it's my belief, and it's Dr. Gabor Mate's belief, that these can be helped through meditation. So the other part that Gabor Mate talked about was not just the response of being too nice, but also about the importance of creating healthy boundaries. And so unregulated being nice, that means no boundaries, put you at risk because it's not necessarily what is good for the individual, but it is what society teaches people to be. And there's more recognition now that there is a price to that. There's also importance for the needs of the inner child to connect with others, to connect with people who are close, to connect with society, to connect with each other, because through that connection is where we find things that we need, things like love, things like belonging, things like being creative and able to contribute to society. And there's also another important concept, and it's called self-care. That's how we take care of ourselves. And it stems from a belief that I am worth being taken care of. I am worth being cared about. Because sometimes if you're giving all the time, you might be trying to satisfy this basic human need, but it's already there. And if we can get the stress out of the way, we can find that we are worthy, that we do have love, that we do have value, that we have recognition from others, and that we have a place where we belong. And that's part of what the inner child needs. So one of the things to watch out for is maybe being so busy taking care of others before we get around to taking care of ourselves. Over time, the overload from the chronic stress hormones puts a person at risk. Okay, so I think I've already covered this part, so how are we doing for time? Okay. I'd like to take the discussion that I've had, that I've just given, and I'd like to work that into a meditation. So meditation of loving kindness and creation of a sense of security. And the goal of today is to just become aware of what's happening in your body. So I'll do the introduction, we'll do some breathing, and then I'll follow that up by a body scan. And the reason I find the body scan so useful is that sometimes where we hold our stresses is the very same places where we hold our joy. And it's sort of, we make room for one or the other. So it's just to acknowledge that the body chemistry can change depending on what we're focusing on, and the body chemistry can change so it works better for us. And so just to become aware of that. So I'd just like you to get comfortable in your seats. And then I'm just gonna start the meditation. I'd like you to breathe just a little bit slower than you normally do, maybe a little bit deeper. And throughout the meditation that I lead, if there's something you don't want to do, just don't do it. Do what you need for yourself. As you do your meditation, start at your feet. You might want to put your feet flat on the ground so that you feel grounded. I want you to slowly scan from your feet to your knees, to your hips, to your stomach, to your heart, to your shoulders, to your neck, to your ears, to the top of your head, and scan for any signs of tightness or stress or pain. I'd like you to give yourself permission to see if you can send healing energy through the form of feeling positive emotions to those same areas where you might be carrying some stress. Now I'd like you to do a breath that is made famous by Andrew Weil, and that's the breathe in for 4, hold for 7, and out for 8. And this is good for getting in touch with your positive emotions. Breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. In for 4, hold for 7, and out for 8. And one more time. And out for 8. Do a breath in and out. And picture a place that represents safety for you, that represents security, that is a place that you can come back to any time where you might feel a little bit anxious, or you might feel a little bit vulnerable. Know that you have this safe place that you can come back to. You might have 2 or 3 safe places that you can go to. A secure and safe place is foundational. I'd like you to direct some kind and loving feelings towards yourself. And from heart math, we know that if you direct those feelings as though you could breathe through your heart, that you can access the chemistry behind the loving kindness feelings. And if you have that loving kindness feeling generating in and out of your heart, see if you can also generate loving kindness through your stomach area. And also to your head area. These are areas where your body interprets the loving kindness spirit and helps you to heal. Within that framework where you know there's safety and you have that loving kindness, look back at maybe an early experience, maybe an experience before you could even speak, and see if that inner child, you can connect with that child. And if you're reaching towards the inner child and the inner child is reaching towards you, see if you can tell what is the inner child saying it needs. And you as the adult, what can you tell that inner child about your ability to provide that need? See if there's a little conversation. Maybe it's just one word. Maybe it's just a feeling. What does this inner child, what does this adult, what does this mind, this body, this soul, this all of me need? And your goal is just to be aware of what you need. Get to do the same body scan that you started with your feet, going up to your body. Just pay attention to any areas that might still be tense or tight. And send some loving kindness to each and every part of yourself. As you go hand in hand with your adult self and your inner child. This is the environment where you can look at or get a glimpse of a little bit of the pain that might need some more attention, where the adult can lead the inner child through to a joyful, kind experience. And the inner child has a lot of strength and power to direct you towards the joyfulness that is meant to be yours. You and the inner child who hold each other dear to your heart, who reflects love when you look at them, who lets you mirror back feelings of love, respect, value, worth, recognition. Where do you feel these in your body? Look for them in your heart, in your stomach, in your head, on your shoulders, in your feet. Circulate that loving kindness throughout your body. And as you have feelings of loving kindness, accept that that is part of you and who you are. You also know that you can send it out. Send it out to people you care about. Send that feeling out to someone who needs it. Send it out to whoever you want to send it out to. Gabor Mate says that healing is a two-way street. When you share that loving kindness with another person, you are engaging in healing. You know how to find loving kindness in your body. You know how to circulate it through your body. You know how to feel loving kindness, and you know how to share loving kindness with others. And this is what helps you heal from autoimmune, helps you get your body better, not just your body, but your mind and your spirit. To finish the meditation, by having you do more of the 4-7-8 breath work so that you can set this feeling inside your body, and it's yours to access at will whenever you want. As I lead this meditation to a close, I invite you to start to breathe more normal, more like you regularly breathe. And when you are ready, come back to the room and open your eyes. So should we have a break, or do you want to just go into questions? What? Break?
Questions.
Question, okay. So, ready for questions.
And Christine will make sure to repeat the question so everybody can get it on recording.
Do we have any questions or comments? Yes, Wayman.
Does Gabor Mate talk a lot about the inner child? I know it's the inner child that I remember, like it's from Alice Miller, it's from the 1980s. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, and you were saying that he's kind of like adding a more kind of thing about the inner child, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, so the question is, does Gabor Mate talk a lot about the inner child and the different ways of looking at the inner child more from a broader perspective than just the mother-child relationship? The answer to that is yes. And I think if you Google Gabor Mate and inner child, there'll be lots of YouTubes. And so I'm just sort of skimming the surface of the data that he has, but you'll find it in the YouTubes. Thank you for asking the question. Yeah, Stephanie.
It's actually also a question for after break, but I was wondering in your social work experience, like have you seen evidence that your mental health can impact your physical health? Like is it something you saw in the way he's describing and just communication and
So Stephanie, you're asking the question, have I seen where mental health and physical health can be resolved by going through the steps of meditation or other techniques? Have I seen it in my own social work career? Yeah. So, I would have to say that, I've certainly seen a lot of positive, productive change in people's lives, certainly. And I think that, for people going through pain, it helps if there is a supporting person so that nobody has to go through that pain alone. And I think that's sort of part of the human condition, that you need somebody to walk with you. You don't go through pain alone. And essentially, a lot of my work in cardiac and renal has had to do with that. So I have seen successes in the past, yes. And in the present. Yeah.
So I think, you, your last comment started to address this, that if someone is struggling with feelings of unworthiness, so it might be difficult for them to approach themselves with a sense of loving kindness. So do you have suggestions around that?
I think that the sense of unworthiness, or feeling like I'm just not good enough, or the feeling that I'm just not worth what other human beings are worth, is what starts that process that Gabor Mate says of being too nice. That I have to be nice to other people so that I establish that there is some value in me. And the flip side of that is to look at yourself and say, no, I have value in me because I was born valuable. I was born with love. I was born with rights. And to take that perspective, because every inner child has it. And what we have to do is remove the layers of stress, the chronic stress, the chemicals that keep us wrapped up. And if we do that, we change the course of our health in notable ways. Gabor Mate has never said, do this and it will cure you. Do this and you will be automatically well. It's not that. It's more like, if I can see my inner child with loving kindness, I open more doors. And if I can walk through and be vulnerable, I'm more in touch. The more in touch I am, the less I have to dissociate and numb myself from my own real needs. So, not sure if I answered your question. So the way to view yourself is that, yeah, I have inherent human value. I have inherent love. I have inherent worth, as opposed to I have to earn those things. When you're born, you have those things, and then we cover them up. So the way to get back to it is to take a different perspective. Go with the belief, I have these things inherently, and that way they're easier to find. Hi.
Comment on the role of forgiveness and self-compassion in your
Repeat that question.
Can I,
comment on the role of forgiveness in self-compassion that you invite as an accident when you do.
yeah, so what is the role of forgiveness and self-compassion? Is that the question?
Specifically the role of forgiveness.
Specifically,
Nature of forgiveness.
specifically the nature of forgiveness. So a lot of times when you're looking at inner child stuff, there could be a lot of hurt there. There could be a lot of anger, and there could be the feeling that someone is to blame for how I'm feeling and how I've turned out to be. And I think that the role of forgiveness is essential, because you can't move from your spot if you hold fast those beliefs that other people have been unkind to you. you still know what is true, and you can still recognize that these harmful things have happened to me. But I need to move on so that I can find my own loving kindness, and that could be through forgiveness. Forgiveness is acknowledging that this awful thing happened to me. And it's about moving from continuing to be caught by whatever has happened and being able to move on through forgiveness so that whatever has happened doesn't make you stuck there. And when you can forgive, it doesn't necessarily change what happened, but what it changes is where you stand in relation to it. And when you forgive, it allows you to have different feelings about it. So it's sometimes hard to forgive, but forgiveness is one of the things that helps you get more in touch with the spirit of the inner child. Does that answer your question on the forgiveness part? Okay. And then the part about the self-compassion, if we look at the person with the propensity to develop autoimmune responses, that person has such developed years of the ability to give because of the underlying not recognizing that I need to be giving to myself in order to maintain my worthiness. But by not believing that I have that right to being loved, being worthy, I have that right, it's easy to direct it out to try to earn that. But in the human condition, you have a right to be loved, you have a right to be feeling worthy. And if you can make the conditions so that you can find that, even for yourself, so that's why self-care is so important rather than just other care. Not saying that other care is not important, but if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not taking care of that inner child, then we're also not taking care of our adult needs. So it's the self-compassion gives you the capacity to do both. It starts with a change of belief. It's a different perspective. Does that make sense?
June, how would you suggest getting in touch with some of the unresolved issues, like you were referring to, like the anger or frustration? If they're there, is it, finding that safety in the body first, and then maybe exploring and touching into emotion cognitively? Like, how do we uncover in order to deal with that?
So how do we uncover when we're using anger? So anger is a kind of like, how I said it was important to set some boundaries. And anger is a huge boundary. It keeps people away. It keeps us from feeling our own vulnerability. So it's a style, just like being nice is a style, being angry is a style. And to get behind that, it's still the loving kindness directed towards the self. And then if you can get through so that you yourself see yourself as being capable of being more than just the anger, being more of the human, being more connected with your feelings, then it's easier to look at those boundaries created by anger. Did I answer your question?
And I think boundaries are a big part of that, but
Yeah.
what about for maybe the person that isn't in touch with their anger? Because they're
'Cause it's
being
so
kind and they're being nice, and
Yeah.
Like when I'm listening to you describe that, and
Yeah.
they're showing up in a different way.
Yeah,
So then
Yeah.
potentially like maybe the sadness or grief or, not like some of more of those unresolved emotions, like how can a practice support that?
so I think that if I look at Gabor Mate's example, the more hurt we have, the more pain we have, the more stuff that we carry from day to day, the more cocooned we are, the more insulated our inner child is. And it's hard to get there to process it. And so the idea of building up safety, of knowing that your body already has receptors for joyfulness and for love, that those things are already in your body. If we find ways to work through the stressors, and I'm not saying that it's easy, I mean, we're looking at like the populations that Gabor Mate worked with, the homeless and the drug addicted, the dying, and probably as healthcare providers in our own worlds, we've gone through a lot of painful situations, and also as us personally, as people, we've gone through all of those. And some of them are harder to unwrap than others. But what I do find is that if you start with the manageable ones, the other ones can follow, or you can do enough of them that once you have enough sensation of love, worthiness, recognition, those are all things that humans need. And what Gabor Mate said is that it's not necessary that you go through that process alone, because then it's more difficult. But if you have somebody that cares about you, cares enough about you, loves you, it's easier, the environment is easier for you to go through that process. And I think that's one of the most important things that he said. Gabor Mate said that you need to connect with somebody in order to go through this process. It's not something that you journey through alone. You might not make it if you journey through alone.
I think sometimes a piece of forgiveness has to do with not necessarily holding ourselves responsible for other people's behavior.
Right.
And I think, that can be a big factor in sort of sense of unworthiness if other people behave badly that we take it on as being responsible for. So one of the boundaries is sort of, not taking on that, not owning the responsibility for somebody's behavior, letting it be their stuff. Sometimes, there's times where we may need to own it, but there are times where it may not be our stuff.
Yeah. So the comment is that sometimes when something happens, it may not necessarily be our fault, but we sometimes are socially conditioned to take on that responsibility, and that adds to the more frustration, to more moving away from our own self-care. Yeah, there are a lot of societal, conditional kinds of behaviors that we have learned over the years.
Trina, I wonder if I can make a comment just to follow up on the forgiveness.
Yeah.
And I hold a very different perspective about forgiveness. And my perspective is forgiveness is not necessary. Well, that's strange. Why isn't forgiveness necessary? So every single one of us has an inner voice that constantly is talking to you, right? Do you all have a voice? Absolutely. And is it nice to you or not? No. And that's your inner voice, that's your inner child that's wounded. And every moment we live our existence is referenced against this belief system of who we believe we are. Have I operated in a way that is congruent with how I believe I should be? And this goes on subconsciously, moment to moment. I don't believe we have free will. Things are operating below our level of consciousness. And then we do it, and then we think, I thought this. But you have to understand that voice that's criticizing us moment to moment is only there to protect us. It is skillful. So, if I act in whatever way I have acted, that is a skillful way for me to feel safe. And if June acts in a way that I don't think is really very skillful, she's also just trying to protect herself. So I really don't think we need to have forgiveness. I think we just need to have understanding that everyone is operating in a way to just feel safe, loved, and worthy. And so forgiveness is not necessary. It's understanding that we're all wounded and that we're all just trying to be okay. And this is not about fixing and changing our wounded child. It is about changing our relationship with it. And I think that we have the capacity to be our own therapist. For most of us, we're not talking about psychotic behavior, but we have the capacity to reparent our woundedness. So that's the observation. The question for you, June, is you led us through this great meditation about how we can be with our woundedness and our child in a formal way. Is there a way to bring that practice into the moment, right? In other words, my voice is saying, oh, Phil, you did it again. You're just terrible. You're useless. Is there a way to bring this reparenting, reloving skill for our woundedness in the moment?
So I think that what it means is that you go through those feelings and you have those feelings. Sometimes it stems from what you believe about yourself to begin with. And if you can, through loving kindness, spot what it is that you believe about yourself and change that a notch to be more kinder to yourself, then maybe you have the capacity to not beat yourself up so much. And it's that capacity that I'm referring to. And sometimes when I think it's really true to understand yourself, that really, and understand the contradictions and the complexities of yourself as you observe yourself is really important. When I talk about forgiveness, I'm thinking that there's somebody else who's blaming me for whatever I'm doing. And if I can't change how I see that, it keeps me stuck right here. The power of the forgiveness is to allow yourself to see yourself in a kinder, more generous way, because neither one of those things is set in stone. You have the ability to decide what you're going to do next. And I would say, do the gentler, kinder thing.
Great.
Did I answer your question?
I love that. And that's bringing up for me even the energy of self-forgiveness in those moments where we are aware or we notice or it's a mistake or, perhaps I've done a behavior that, I did it again. But then that reminding that, I am having my human experience and I am acting unconsciously. And it's like, how do I bring that compassion, that energy of forgiveness to myself in the moment to find some ease, as opposed to that triggered again response, or it's like, okay, how do I let the nervous system soften by bringing that own energy of loving kindness, either compassion, forgiveness, acknowledgement, even just beginning with that first step of awareness, right?
And June made a very critical point here. The question was, how do we offer compassion to ourselves? Because the big problem we have is we always identify with our sense of self. how can I offer compassion to myself if what is offering the compassion is the same that is in pain? But if there's the recognition that it's my woundedness that's in pain, then there's the capacity to step back, because you're not the one that's in pain. It's your woundedness. So that's a great way to be able to offer the compassion, is to think of it, this sense of loving kindness is offering compassion to my woundedness. I am not the woundedness. And that's the way you can do it, right?
That's
That's
great,
what you
Phil.
suggested.
That's great in your words. I love that. Yeah, so you're offering the loving compassion to that part of you that is wounded, so that it gets a chance to heal.
Yes.
Great.
Sorry, you had said earlier that you need somebody in order to go through this process. Does that person need to be aware of what you're going through, or you just need to have somebody safe in your life?
So I think the reason I said that is because Gabor Mate said that that's the essence, the sense of having someone outside of yourself who cares about you reflected back. So I think it's that caring about you, that loving you, that thinks you're worthy. That's the part that's essential to that. And whether they know all your story or not, I don't think it's necessary to know all that, because what you're going for is just trying to be a little bit vulnerable so that you can feel better. That's the part that's essential.
Even offering ourselves physical touch, that's comfort and have real great value. I was at the dentist recently, and before they used freezing, they used a numbing cream, but it was really smart that she had her assistant, when she did do the injection, she had her assistant patting and rubbing my shoulder, which was really great, because it's like your brain is then going, okay, do I want to focus on pain, because the injection still carries some pain, or this lovely touch on my shoulder. And I think the first time I was at a workshop where someone had us hug ourselves, it was just such an interesting experience. Might have even been Paul Fair, and we've lost it presented here. And realizing that we have the capacity to offer ourselves some of that physical comfort. Having your heart rubbing your chest, I think that can also be.
Yeah. So Deborah's saying that physical touch is also healing for us. And I think that Gabor Mate says that it's the body integrated with the mind and integrated with the spirit. It's all one. And so, yeah, physical touch can certainly help. Yeah.
Even holding our hand. I've been in meetings where it's gotten a little intense and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be here for myself. You know, I gotta hold my own hand. But it can be something simple and no one even knows, look, hands together, right? And just actually the connection and the awareness to bring, just to bring it down and settle the body, it's actually very powerful. Like how you started the meditation, feet on the ground, coming back in. Thank you for bringing that.
And also some of the literature supports bilateral, like, if you do this sort of thing or this sort of thing, bilateral movement if you're walking or you're running, that's also helpful.
June, how would you help people here find out what they need to hear for themselves?
So the part that in the meditation where I said for the adult to reach up to the inner child and the inner child to reach back, in that spot is a message, or there's room for a message. And sometimes it's just hug me more. Sometimes it's just love me more or be with me. Whatever that little message is, in whatever voice you see that as or hear that as, that's the point that I would start with.
I've also done the freeform writing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that can be really powerful as well. After a meditation, to just start writing what comes up without agenda. It's
I think we all know what we need to hear if we're willing to ask the question. And if you ask yourself, what did you need to hear that you never heard as a child from your parents? If you ask yourself that question, then you'll discover what's calling to be heard. Or if you ask the question, why? Oh, this is terrible. Why? Well, because I shouldn't do that. Why? Well, because I need to get it right. Why? Because if I don't, Mom will be angry at me. Why? It just spirals to the truth. So that's another way to discover what needs to be heard, is why.
I think that's a really good point, what you didn't hear that you needed to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to pick up on my question in my head.
Did you move
I
your
wanted
hand?
you to repeat what you said. You said something like, ask yourself the question that you do. Can you repeat that part?
Can you repeat it in here?
I'll speak now.
Okay.
It's really asking the question, what did I want to hear when I was a child from my parents that I didn't hear from them? What didn't I get from them that I wanted to get?
Thanks, Phil.
You know, I've done a lot of inner child work, so.
So we have just one final.
Harry, a moment ago, you said reaching out to your inner child, and your inner child reaching back. And in that space is an opportunity for a message. Mary, has your inner child ever said anything to you? And if it did, was it in a cogent English sentence?
So it doesn't necessarily have to be in a sentence. It could be through a feeling. It could be through recognition of a yearning. It could be in a multiple different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be verbal. Because when you think about it, your inner child starts off as being a person that doesn't speak, doesn't know how to speak. So more, it could be just a feeling.
Thank you.
Okay, so to close, perhaps you can summarize it all in just your final few key points that if we were to leave tonight, you would want us to remember what?
What I want you to remember is that the whole reason that I was doing this talk was to look at chronic stress and ways to feel better about chronic stress. And one of the reasons that chronic stress is there is because it comes from within, and it could come from a time when we were a child, or it could have come from a time when something happened. But at the bottom of all this, I think it's important to remember that the inner child knows the feelings of love, the feelings of worth, and the feelings of safety, that there's somewhere in there, that even if it's just a small percentage, it's still there. And that's from the work of Gabor Mate. So I think that's it in a nutshell.